By the year 2000, PC gaming seemed to be falling behind. It was an incredibly good year for the Nintendo 64, and Japan had released the PlayStation 2. Cross-platform games were not yet common, and PC games seemed to be much more complicated than current console offerings. In 1998 and 1999, the PC became known for technical, competitive first-person shooters like Quake 3, Unreal Tournament, and Counter-Strike. Sandbox games were also not very popular, or even particularly good at this point. Hitman Codename 47 aimed to change that. The often overlooked but incredibly entertaining game had its fair share of problems, but I'm here to break it down and tell you why you need to play it. This is The Long-Winded Gamer. Hitman is a game about, well, a hitman. Without revealing too much, the story goes like this. You're a bald guy with a tattoo of a barcode on the back of your head, and you wake up in a cell. After running through some training exercises, you escape the asylum that you were imprisoned in. A year later, your character, known as Agent 47, is working for The Agency, a contract service for hitmen. There are 4 very short story arcs focusing on getting close to and killing your target. I won't get too much more into that, but it's the basic premise of the game. Hitman was a pretty revolutionary game. It introduced a lot of sandbox elements, as well as being one of the first games to utilize ragdoll physics and cloth simulation. Because it was one of the first, it was also one of the worst. However bad the ragdoll physics were, it did add a great deal of complexity to the game. You could shoot someone across the room or stuff them down a sewer. It used a technique called verlet integration, which is probably the most primitive of all ragdoll systems. That makes sense because this is one of the earliest implementations of ragdoll physics in a video game. Basically, each hand, head, and limb was connected at their corresponding joints and could move around freely without any restrictions that a normal body would have, sort of like nunchucks. No actual joint constraints or rules were put in place because of the stress that a system like that would put on computers of the time. Because of this, corpses would often look mangled or twisted into physically impossible positions. This, of course, was hilarious. It even had a button where you could slow everything down and watch the bodies fly in slow motion. In addition, the game was riddled with bugs and quirks in the physics engine. Still, this mechanic was very important to the feel of the game. You really got the impression that the characters interacted with the world around them, no matter how ridiculous it looked. It really felt like they were human obstacles instead of targets and objectives. Visually, the game looked pretty good for the time, although it didn't have a cohesive art style. It was mostly just trying to replicate the real world, compared to other games that year like Deus Ex, Diablo 2, and Majora's Mask, which all had very tight, cohesive art design. Hitman looked bare and bland in comparison. This probably was a technical limitation due to the content of each mission, however, so I don't want to dwell on that too much. Animations were also a problem. Mouth movements, body movements, and running also looked very strange and clunky. You could find games as far back as 1996 that have better animations in 3D. Maybe I'm nitpicking because not very many of those games tried to have real-world feel to them, but I think it's still worth noting. All of these problems helped give the game its charm, however. One of the most charming parts of the game were the stealth mechanics. The game required you to stay hidden or don disguises in order to complete the mission without having to kill absolutely everyone on the map. Sometimes this involved staying out of restricted areas or holding the right gun. The mechanics themselves were very well thought out, but simple. As long as no one sees the person you killed, your disguise worked. As long as you were holding the right weapon that the enemy was supposed to be, your disguise worked. It made sense from a gameplay standpoint, but it's absolutely ridiculous when you put it in the context of this supposed real world. Another thing that made snooping around incredibly awkward was that all the NPCs were programmed to stare at you as long as you weren't behind them, no matter how far away you were. That combined with 47's rigid posture created some of the most tense and memorable moments of the game. The game has no concept of personal space. In future iterations, they fixed that by having people doubt your disguise if you got too close to them and stuck around. But in this game, you could stand mere inches away from a person just waiting for the perfect moment to blow their face off. The game did a really good job of implementing sandbox mechanics. Missions would be semi-randomized, mixing up the location of objectives, as well as offering multiple ways to complete a mission. These methods ranged from doing clean stealth runs to literally killing everyone. You were penalized, however, for killing innocent civilians, but it was almost always worth it just to watch them fly across the room. This game really laid the foundation for killing people in the most ridiculous ways possible. The cherry on top was the voice acting and the dialogue. It sounds incredibly forced and awkward, which goes hand in hand with 47's terrible disguises.
I need to use the bathroom.
Not only was it bad, but they relied heavily on the use of stereotypes for the accents.
Obviously, you are not invited here, mister.
All in all, it's a fantastic game and I'm still playing it today after all these years. It spawned a franchise that had both better and more commercially successful sequels, but this game really hit the sweet spot of badly implemented modern technology and awesome gameplay. Combine that with an awesome soundtrack and you get a truly entertaining game. Hitman Codename 47 is like that terrible movie that you watch over and over again because of how weirdly good it is. It's not amazing, but it's way too fun to put down and it's why I still come back to it all these years later.